I'm Annie Fenn. I'm a physician. I'm a chef, and I just recently published a book, as Ed mentioned, called The Brain Health Kitchen, Preventing Alzheimer's Through Food. And I became interested in this topic around 2015. This is where Tom Holland comes into the story. He and his colleagues at Russia published a paper called The Mind Diet Study, which many of you may be familiar with. But I had been following the research with my medical background and my culinary background on how aging populations age successfully and without dementia. And I became fairly obsessed by this topic back then. And then since 2015, we've had not only the Mind Diet, but dozens and dozens of papers that show that the way you eat and the lifestyle that you have, which includes exercise and sleep, stress mitigation, things like that, they can really move the needle and prevent cognitive decline. We're talking age-related cognitive decline, we're talking Alzheimer's disease, we're talking Parkinson's disease, and we're talking especially vascular dementia, the type you get from pre-existing cardiovascular disease. So all of these dementias, especially Alzheimer's, the most common one, can be prevented with a combination of brain healthy nutrition and lifestyle. And so this week has become my focus since 2015. I started the Brain Health Kitchen as a cooking school. It's still the only cooking school of its kind focused specifically on this topic. I have a newsletter that I write about it. Now we have a book for everyone to have recipes where they can learn how to cook brain healthy. I think the most important message here is the science is so solid that following a certain dietary pattern, and this is not a diet, this is not something that you go on in January and then you go off of it in February and then you go back to whatever you were doing before. This is about tapping into what is important to you. What are the things that make you want to age more successfully? How do you want to start taking care of your brain? And how will you do that? I think it all starts with the brain health mindset. You ask yourself, why do you want to take care of your brain? Is it because you're watching a parent struggle with Alzheimer's and you see what that's like, and maybe you don't want to have your children have to go through the same experience you are? That's a big why for a lot of us. Or maybe you just have a lot of cool plans, you know, in your 70s, 80s, and 90s. Maybe you're finally going to be free to travel the world. And, you know, Travis is still going to be doing these ultimate extreme adventure races, even in those decades. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to start a new business. Maybe you want to get an RV and travel around the country. Like, what is it that you want to be doing? What does your life want to be like, you know, in these later decades? People are living longer thanks to all the strides in medicine. That means that people are becoming more at risk for dementia, and we are seeing a tsunami of cases of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias because of our aging population. So I believe that the brain health starts in the kitchen. I think that the brain health nutrition science is really easy to access. There are basically 10 brain healthy food groups and 6 food groups to limit or avoid. And I go into that in detail in my book and some other places on my newsletter and in my website. But basically this is a plant-based diet where you're choosing mostly whole food, and you're saying no to ultra-processed foods. You're saying no to sugary drinks, which we know are directly detrimental to the memory center of the brain, the hippocampus. You're saying no to a lot of the saturated fat foods that are laden in the American diet. The combination of saturated fat and the American diet is really bad for the brain. So we're going to reach for more brain-friendly fats, like those you get from olive oil and nuts and seeds and fish and avocados, things like that, the mono and polyunsaturated fats.
It can all be very, very delicious. As
so this is the thing about eating for brain health. It's not difficult to get started. It's also the most delicious foods. It does mean getting off junk food. It does mean not drinking soda pop or diet sodas anymore and switching to, you know, just plain coffee or tea or water. You know, it does mean kind of, you know, saying no to this industrial food system that has been pretty much evolved to now that 60% of all Americans' calories come from ultra-processed food. So we really need to flip that around so that we are eating mostly whole foods. And that's the best way to nourish the brain. So I would say the best way to start is think about the foods that you really love. Like, there must be some vegetables you love. There must be some leafy greens you love. There must be some nuts and some seeds, some types of fish and seafood that you love. There must be some beans or lentils that you love. And even if you don't love beans, maybe you like hummus, which is made from chickpeas. And instead of stocking your cupboard with tortilla chips and potato chips, then maybe when you go to the grocery store, you just get these little packages of hummus. I take these on the trail. I throw them in my backpack. Sometimes I have them in the car if I'm actually starving. But hummus with some, chopped up vegetables or even some whole grain crackers is a really, really good snack, and it gives you a serving of beans too. So the fact that willpower.
Now, people out there who are listening, so people who are listening, if you want to type in like your favorite food, and we could see what you're thinking, those favorite brain healthy foods that kind of Annie went through. Any one of them, just go out there and write it out. If you have any questions, of course, always write it out as well. So I'm trying to jump in here. I can do a little bit of that.
I would love
encouraging people to just kind of think
about
that
what
for a
your
moment.
foods are, and that's where you start. You start with the berries you like, the leafy greens you like, and then you can build your own food pyramid around that. And the other thing I just want to talk about real briefly is this concept of willpower. We think that we should have willpower to resist certain foods, like potato chips and onion dip, for example, or like a pepperoni pizza. But most of it, willpower has been shown not to be a real thing. Social scientists have shown us that willpower is not something we should rely on. What we need to do is switch our thinking to our food environment. Okay, if you put a bag of potato chips in front of me, chances are I will eat them. Therefore, I don't bring, a lot of these snack foods into my home. I don't have them in my car. I don't have them at my desk. I manipulate my food environment so that the brain healthy choice is the easiest choice. And I don't have to rely on willpower to say no, because we've been indoctrinated since we were little kids to eat these foods, and that these foods are comforting and healthy, when actually they're everything but. They're comforting in the short term, but they're detrimental in the long term. And they're basically contributing to the Alzheimer's epidemic in our country. So we need to say no to these foods, control your food environment. Don't rely on willpower. It's not a thing. I wish it was, but it's not. Maybe Travis has really great willpower. I don't know.
Can I ask you a question actually, Annie?
Yes.
And I agree with you. I mean, even with exercise and stuff, it's not about willpower. It's about creating habits and finding a way to enjoy these things. So it's not this grind. It's just like what you do. But anyway, my question for you, Annie, is you said that, we've been indoctrinated since we were kids to eat in these ways with processed foods, et cetera. What's your advice for those of us who have younger kids? My kids are 10 and 12, and man, I look at your book and I'm like, this is so beautiful. And then I go to my parents' house and my mom is like cooking recipes for your book every single day. And I love them, and my kids love them. And then in my own daily life with my family, I'm like, man, I'm working, my wife's working, like we got soccer practice, it's like this, just all this stuff.
Yeah.
What's your advice? Like, how do we, I know it's not going to be perfect, but how do we make it better, especially with kids, with habits?
I
what do
love
you think
this
about
question.
that?
And it's so important, because most of the research we have on how to prevent cognitive decline comes through studying people at middle life. But we need to pay attention to the younger generation, because this is where your habits form. This is when you grow up saying, I'm a person who eats healthy food, or I'm a person who exercises every day. This is born in the household where you grow up. And if it's not, you have to really work hard to change that. So all I can say is you don't have 100% control over what your children eat, especially when they get to a certain age, like middle school, high school, and they're off on their sports tournaments and they're out of the home, going to friends' houses. But you do have control over what is in your house and what you feed your children. And so I believe that being very, very consistent with the foods that you choose to give the kids is important. There's a lifelong message there for them that this is how we eat. We eat healthy food. We don't eat junk. You can have that at a sleepover, and I'm not going to freak out or anything, but we don't eat that here at home. And then they get used to how delicious the foods are. It's the foods that they're used to having. And I guarantee that when they get to middle school and high school, they will rebel and they will enjoy telling you that they went to McDonald's after school. And you're not going to freak out about that either. You're just going to serve, what you normally serve at home, and you're going to make it so that they like it, of course. And I can guarantee you, and this is what studies show, when the kids leave the home and they end up setting up their own kitchen, sometime during college and after college, they fall back on the habits they grew up with. They start to cook with whole foods. And they may not be perfect. They may still be having some junk food, but they will rely on the things that they knew that they learned at the kitchen table. So you just kind of have to keep persevering and know it's not perfect and know they're going to try to, rebel and make you feel bad, but that's just what kids do. It's how they separate from us, right?
And Travis, honestly, if I can just interject, I will tell you, the doctor herself was in my kitchen cooking for my children not so very long ago. And I will tell you, I mean, she taught me some great tricks. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing overnight change. For those of you who are watching and you do have younger kids at home and you want to try and make a lot of these changes, first of all, Annie's book is a great place to start because she breaks everything down in a way that is, at the risk of sounding really cheesy, very digestible. She really does, though. I mean, she proves why what she's trying to teach you works, and she does it in a way that's very easy to follow. The science makes sense. You're not going to get bogged down in just pages and pages of science to kind of sort through on your own, where you'll have to go and Google words that you don't understand. There's a whole first part of the book that really talks about what food groups are important, why they're important, how much to eat of what. It's so easy to understand. And then she really she taught me how to sort of introduce foods like that otherwise your children would never eat. Let's take zucchini, for example. I hated zucchini as a kid. My parents could never get me to eat it. But now I make pasta with it probably twice a week. And so she taught me, she's like, hey, let's make this great pasta. And when we're making it for the kids specifically, let's do half and half. So a way to kind of get them off those like white rice or, white grain noodles, let's add half and half. So maybe you do half spiralized zucchini noodles and half spaghetti, and you mix it up. And if you put enough red sauce and whatever it is on it, turkey meatballs, whatever, kids don't even really notice that they're eating it. But slowly over time, you're changing their taste buds to really appreciate the whole healthy food. And the other added benefit to it is that it fills kids up longer. Rather than them having that big crash after a meal because it's basically full of empty calories, they feel full longer. They're not going back into the kitchen and reaching for snacks, an hour after dinner is over, saying, I'm hungry before bedtime. So number one, they sleep better, which who doesn't shout for joy when you're a parent of young children that your children are sleeping better? But also, they just feel better. They don't have as many tantrums.
And I would also add that you don't have to tell them exactly what you're doing all the time. There can be a little mystery to this. I remember the first time I served my kids when they were teenagers, this like cauliflower couscous. It was sort of like it's a lot like the cauliflower fried rice in the book, cauliflower fried rice with kimchi. So it's basically making, a rice dish or couscous dish with cauliflower instead. But I didn't say, oh, you guys, check this out. We are having cauliflower for dinner. I didn't. I knew they were hungry. I try to limit snacking before dinner and just put out healthy snacks like carrot sticks or something. And then you put down the food. And I swear my boys devoured the cauliflower couscous until it was gone. And they didn't even really notice. So you can be a little stealth.
And the same is true with smoothie. You put enough strawberries in something, with a little milk, they're not going to notice, 2 cups of spinach or, a little piece of ginger or something. I mean, there really are easy ways to do it. But I think the key is just, right,
slowly,
over time.
Persistently,
build these things
same message. It's good to be on the same page as your partner, obviously. Mixed messages are really hard for kids. They're always going to go with the easy message. And I have to say my oldest now is 25 years old. He's been in an apartment for a while. He doesn't necessarily like to cook at all. But when I go to his house, he has a jar of nice olive oil on the counter. He has a box of arugula in the fridge. He has salmon in the freezer. And he has some asparagus or another vegetable. And I'll take it.
That's
a
That's a
gold
win.
medal
That's a
for a
gold medal.
25-year-old.
He's
There's a lot of
15 years
fear,
ahead of the
but
ball right there.
we're not going for perfection here.
One thing I was thinking of is that as we eat more brain healthy, I've noticed that, I didn't have a very good diet for a long time, I'll admit. I think my diet was not so great. But since we've been changing, the kitchen and everything over the past, 4 or 5 years, what I realized is that it's the other side of the coin that happens. Like if I were to say, oh, I really want Doritos Cool Ranch flavor because it's Super Bowl Sunday and we get that as a special treat or something, I don't feel good after I eat it. And so our bodies actually readjust and to where they probably should be, so that this becomes almost like a foreign object that we're putting into
That's a
our
really
bodies.
good point, Ed.
So,
And you know how when any of us who has raised kids know that you don't let kids get away with not liking a food if they just try it once or twice. The same thing happens as adults. You have to give yourself some time to change your palate. If you're used to having really salty, really sugary, really fat-laden foods all the time, you're going to have to change the way your body experiences that. And when you get to the other side, like Ed is talking about, and your diet is primarily brain healthy food, your body, your gut microbiome no longer knows what to do with junk food. And it sends you the message that this is not working for me anymore. And so it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And it also makes it easier, too. I will say, sugar's the one thing we haven't touched on. I'd like you to actually talk about sugar a little bit, Annie, because the effects of sugar alone we're seeing it's just devastating. And not just for preventing Alzheimer's and dementia, but for type 2 diabetes and cancer and heart disease. Sugar just really is, of all the things you can put in your body, I'd say as bad as saturated fats. And there's so many foods that are sitting in those middle aisles of the grocery store where there's hidden sugar everywhere. Even
and the truth about sugar is that when as adults we become insulin resistant after seeing so much sugar in our bloodstream all the time. It changes the way our body metabolizes it. But the brain also becomes insulin resistant, and the memory center of the brain, the hippocampus, shows signs of insulin resistance. That's why diabetes is a huge risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. But we're also finding from recent studies that pre-diabetes, just having a borderline blood sugar test, maybe just mildly abnormal a few times every few years, also doubles your risk of getting Alzheimer's. So sugar is one of the most important things to pay attention to. It all goes down to like anything you buy at the grocery store. You want to, if it's a food product, you want to look at the nutrition label. You want to zoom in on the added sugars. And you don't want to consume anything that has added sugar in it. Natural sugars are fine as long as you consume them in small amounts and in the context of fiber. For example, when I create a cookie recipe, there's sugar in there because, some baked goods just require sugar to, have certain structure and taste and flavor and, be delicious and all that. But there's always a ton of fiber, like oats or almonds, or like even oat bran I use, which is super high in fiber. And the reason for that is a fiber-rich meal slows down the absorption of the sugar. So you can have a treat that's got fiber in it, but if it's all just junky ingredients like white, all-purpose white flour, white sugar, it's going to hit your bloodstream like a Gatorade, okay? And we don't want that. Getting rid of the sugar in the drinks you consume is probably the low-hanging fruit for most people. If you look at all of these drink products that are very popular in the United States, some of them are marketed to be healthy for you, like these energy drinks, right? And now they even have like all these great health claims on them. And some of them are kind of cool. We're getting a whole faction of the drink industry that has, like adaptogens and, stuff like that. But, when it comes right down to it, you don't want to drink anything that has added sugar in it. And this includes juice. This includes, of course, soda. And we're also learning that artificial sweeteners are just as bad as actual sugar for our bodies and for our brain. Yeah. I would love everyone to get back to drinking. What your brain thrives on is water. And if you drink tea, whether it's real tea or an herbal tea, it's full of flavonoids, it's full of antioxidants, are good for your brain. If you like coffee, I want you to drink it without additives in it. if you need to have a little bit of sugar, fine, maybe some honey, but try to work towards developing a palate where you don't have to have everything taste sweet anymore. And then, you'll really enjoy your coffee more. You'll notice the flavors of it. You'll enjoy your tea. You'll save a ton of money because you don't have to stock up on all those drink products.
Can I ask you another question, Annie?
Sure.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking like I'm an athlete, or I exercise enough that during exercise I'm going to need fuel because I know that'll keep my body from breaking down. It'll make me perform better and also just again not go into a hole of overtraining, etc. Is there a difference metabolically between drinking these sugary things, Coke, juice, whatever, drinking it just kind of all day long? And then what about if you have it during exercise? So maybe, some, hopefully as clean as possible source of maybe an energy or exercise performance drink that maybe has maltodextrin and fructose and maybe some sodium or something like that. Is the body gonna, if you're taking a lot of that during training, is that gonna increase the risk of diabetes and high resting blood sugar and stuff, or is it different because you're exercising and it's just getting burned off real quick?
I believe it's different because it's getting burned off so quickly. So when you consume something that has any kind of sugar in it, it goes into your bloodstream, and then in your body it has to either go to the liver and get processed into glycogen, which is a storage product, or just get burned off and used as fuel right away. But I would submit that most people, when they're exercising, do not need to consume sugar while they're doing it. The type of exercise that you do and that elite athletes do is completely different. But like if I'm just going to go out for an hour bike ride, and then maybe I'm going to lift weights for 30 minutes afterwards, maybe that's a normal workout for me or for most people. I probably don't need to be consuming a lot of these electrolyte and sugar boosted drinks. Yep. If you're going to be doing a 100-mile mountain biking race, or like what are some of the things that you do? Or like, for example, if I'm going to go climb a mountain, I live in Jackson Hole, we've got a lot of peaks. This is what we do in the summer. If I'm going to go on a 6-mile hike, then yes, I will need to constantly be replenishing because my glycogen stores are going to get burned through a couple hours into my workout. So I know we all like to think of ourselves as athletes, but I think that there's athletes and then there's, like the Travis Macy's of the world who need to really engineer their nutrition. For the rest of us, I think you get hydrated before you go out. You make sure you have some snacks that contain salt. Like I like, for example, a medjool date stuffed with peanut butter, sprinkled with salt, something like that, or hummus and like a Triscuit, which is salty. Like these would be the things I would bring with me to replenish my electrolytes.